Hello and welcome to the Smokers Lounge podcast by Black Sheep Weekly Inc., where we look at the herd from afar. In today's podcast, I had the pleasure of having an in-depth conversation with Tim, a second-year student studying a BA in history in London. We had a very fascinating discussion focused on China, going into depth with topics such as Marxism, the Mao Chiang Kai-shek Civil War, China's rise in contemporary politics, Chinese nationalism, and briefly talked about the Uigur and Hong Kong crises. We really hope you guys enjoy what we had to say, and if you did, do give Smokers Lounge a follow wherever you're listening, be it YouTube, Spotify, etc. Also be sure to follow our Instagram page at Black Sheep Weekly Inc. or our Facebook page at BSW Media Inc. Above all, join our mailing list at bswink.com or give us a visit every few days as we keep uploading new content weekly. Much love, and now for Smokers Lounge interview with our special guest, Tim. Hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined with Tim. Tim, what do you study and what are your interests?
Well, I study history in SOAS, and my interest. I don't really have any interest really. I guess I like to watch YouTube videos, like just random. Like I don't really have. This sounds really bad. I don't really have an interest.
Well, I mean, from the conversations we've had outside this podcast, we've been talking a lot about like China, because that's where you're from. What was the big discussion that we had the other day? It was about Marxism and the relevance of it. How does that tie into your course?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think it ties into my course that much. Like Marxism and Marxists have a particular view on history that I think is quite, unique. You probably heard this before, called historical materialism.
Right.
And it's supposed to be like a linear kind of passage from ancient, how do you call it? Like primitive communism, where like people just live in tribes.
Okay.
To a more advanced, like to slavery, to slave society, then to feudal societies, then to capitalist societies, and then hopefully to socialist, and then communism.
Right. What's your fascination with Marx? I don't think I've really asked you that question properly.
Yeah, I don't. Well, coming from China, I've seen like everybody's in China says like, oh, we're socialists. We're like, we're Marxists. Like, we celebrate Marx's birthday. Like last year, I think was the 200th year of Marx's birthday, and we have like a big celebration in China.
Oh, right.
So there's that. Like our basically the founder of the PRC, Mao, was a Marxist. He was a Marxist-Leninist. So, and he openly admits that. So there, like, we know kind of like who Marx is. It's not like in the West when like people just like, oh, who's Marx? I haven't like it's as if like Marx is like a just a random dude that like gave birth to the Russian Revolution or something. So there is a bit of more, I guess, knowledge on Marx, and I guess I just took it to a bit more extreme.
It's a shame. I get that. So, because I never really understood, because from a Western perspective, we're always looking into China. We're always seeing Mao being the legendary figure and the founding father of the modern Chinese state. I never actually knew that Marx actually held kind of a similar position. Would you say that's kind of true? That Marx and Mao are kind of put on the same pedestal? Obviously, I'm assuming Mao is a bit higher, but I don't. Yeah, What are your thoughts on that?
I think Marx is placed like on a very high position. I don't think he's as high as Mao.
Right.
I think he's kind of like the guiding figure behind Mao, and Mao was the person who actually did all these things. Like obviously Marx was dead when the Chinese Revolution happened.
Right. Yeah. What do you think Marx would say when he looks at the Chinese state as it was when Mao took over to what it looks like now? What do you think his opinion would be of it?
So, I'm not really sure what Marx would think when he saw like 1949, when Mao declared the People's Republic of China. I think he wouldn't be I think he would be pleased that Like his theory was proven correct in an Eastern country, like when the working class rise up and took power. But then I wouldn't say he would agree with everything that Mao did, namely the big fuck ups that he did.
Like the Cultural Revolution and the famine.
Yeah,
and
certain
stuff.
things like he wouldn't have anticipated it because he never actually see any actual socialist states in the world before he died. And as of today, I think Marx wouldn't be too happy because like he would be surprised, I'm sure, like, oh, how capitalism has developed. And then it was that, oh, well, this is just capitalism still. Like workers are still being exploited, and okay, they've been exploited in like better ways, but the fundamentals didn't change. And I don't think Marx would really change his idea.
I've always seen Marx and Marxist theory as rather than like a full-blown ideology as like capitalism, let's say. I've always seen it as like something similar to a critique of capitalism, looking at an analysis of the limitations of capitalism. Do you think that's a right view of it, or do you think that that's obviously wrong?
Well, no. I think it's right, but it's only one part of Marx's theory. Like, I think Marxism is not only just like an ideology like capitalism, because capitalism is not a philosophy, isn't it? But Marxism is a philosophy. It's what you call dialectical materialism.
Right.
And that's the basis for all Marxist analysis. So Marx didn't just look at capitalism and say, "Oh, this is bad. That is bad. Like workers being oppressed, being exploited. That's bad, because it's bad." No, his critique of capitalism was that capitalism has its internal contradictions built within it. Like, for example, the socialized production where like a large group of people working in factories, but the factory are owned by like one person or a small group of individual. And like the need for people to produce, so we use the product, like say I make a car so I can drive it. But in capitalism, that's not the case, is it? You make the car not because you want to drive it or not because somebody else wants to drive it. You build the car because you want to sell it. And that's another contradiction of capitalism that will eventually lead to a crisis in capitalism, which will mark its downfall and its replacement of a socialist society where the working people, the workers, the proletariats, own the means of production without capitalists. That's his kind of like logical conclusion, kind of.
Yeah. Because he had this big assumption that eventually it will falter, capitalism will reach its peak, and that's when, the proletariat will be able to take control. Obviously, that's not happened. Do you think if Marx was alive today, he would come to that same logical conclusion based on the nature that capitalism has adjusted to the times, to the explosion of technology we've seen has allowed for, businesses, for the idea of job. We call it the gig economy today. Do you think he would analyze it any way differently based on your understanding of his work?
I think because Marx has his limitations, I have to agree, because Marx only lived in Europe. He never went to like India or China or anywhere else. He only stayed in Germany, France, and Britain. And like as much as he's knowledgeable, but he's not like a saint or anything. He doesn't know everything. So I think if he says he came to Britain today and looked around, he'd probably say, well, it seems like capitalism has developed itself, but then that's not the whole picture, is it? Because in his time there wasn't a global imperialist system. The imperialist system that we had today was already in place when Lenin was alive, which is what Lenin analyzed. That it's no longer like the workers in Britain being oppressed and being exploited by the capitalists in Britain. Well, it's the capitalists in Britain exploiting and oppressing the workers in the global south, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in China, even in India.
Yeah.
And so I don't think, like, there are obviously advancements in capitalism that like we should support, of course. Like, just there's too many to name, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fundamentals that workers are being exploited, that there will be a crisis, which we are in now, didn't really change. Like in Marx's time, there was a crisis, and now there was another crisis.
Yeah.
That didn't really change.
Globalization has clearly played a big role in capitalism's transformation. Would you think that's true? Firstly,
Yeah, definitely.
Because what I've understood from what I've been studying is how through the technology explosion and through the idea that we can get to places in much less time than it took us over 100 years ago, it seems to me that it's become kind of ingrained in, like, you know, in the mindset of people today that, you know, this is how the world works. I've always kind of struggled to really come to terms with the idea that, you know, is there how can we come about an alternative like the Maos, the Stalin, the Lenins, the Trotskyists, the Stalinists, you know, the Pol Pots. You know, how could we make such a radical transition from what we have today, which obviously is not working, obviously has serious flaws, to something that would be more in line with a Marxist kind of point of view. If that makes sense, do you think it's feasible in not in short term, not being short, it's in like next 20 30 years, before the long term in the next century or something? Do you think this transition is possible, essentially?
Well, as a Marxist, I would say sure, it's
right.
possible.
Yeah.
But like, so okay, why is it possible? In my opinion, like, because we have already seen that it's possible, like in Russia, in China, in North Korea, in Cuba, in all these places, it's possible for the workers to rise up, take control, and build a socialist plan economy. That's possible, right?
Yeah.
Like, they have their limitations, of course. They're not like perfect.
Not perfect, yeah.
But it's possible to build like an imperfect system, of course.
Right, yeah.
So how would it be done today? Would, of course, be similar. Okay, it's kind of obvious. Like, workers rising up, taking control.
Yeah.
And I would argue that it will have more impact. Like, for example, the workers in China took control, kick out the capitalist Communist Party now.
Right, yeah.
But and took control and set up like some sort of socialist plan economy. That would be so impactful on the world. That like so many things are produced in China. Say if like America just lost all its like Chinese made in China stuff, right? Like how much of an impact would that be on America? How much of an impact would that be on American workers who all of a sudden lost all their like cheaply produced goods because no longer are the Chinese workers being exploited by foreign capital, by their own capitalists.
They're in control.
They would see the truth that their wealth, the wealth of American people, the wealth of Britain, the wealth of France, Germany, all these imperialist powers, didn't came from themselves. They came from the global south. They claim all their wealth came from the colonized, or not actually colonized, but like the imperialized countries in the world, the African countries, the Asian countries, and stuff, and so on.
Right. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, if a big country like China is able to kind of make this big transition, obviously it's going to have profound impacts that would benefit the workers in China, but also influence other countries that are struggling in the same way that China does, and possibly even worse than China does. Obviously, is going to have a big change. My question is more, just due to the fact that we have a media now that the saying, follow the money, right? Anything that goes against the so-called establishment's ideas of how to run society. I mean, I know it's a bit far-fetched, but essentially, the nature of media today, how we get our media, although it is changing, although we are being able to benefit from information technology, from resources like Wikipedia, where anyone can go on and provide information for you, we are still kind of struggling to come to terms with the idea of that we are actually just the customers of big conglomerates, big corporations who kind of take a very big have a big incentive to stay at the top, and in order to do so, do whatever they can to make sure that no one ever considers Marx as a good guy like they would in China, right? So my question is more, obviously, the idea of a state transitioning is quite possible, given the right circumstances and conditions. But would you say that it's but that the implications of this transition and also the possibility of such a transition could be more universal, and also could also prevent a similar kind of situation that we are in now? I know it's a long question, sorry, but
well, like, what do you mean by more universal? I'm not sure. Like, do you mean like because people are being fed into this like capitalist mindset that they can't really see the alternative?
Essentially, yeah. It's the idea that, well, okay, yeah, we've been sold this mantra of Marxism. You go to the US, you say communism, they associate that with Nazis. But when they have really no idea what Marx was talking about, they have no idea why he's relevant even today amongst academics and intellectuals. The fact that we don't really have, it's the presence of Marxists, like yourself, are kind of rare to come by, especially, in a place where people, especially amongst students now, who really just care about getting money in their pocket because living costs are so high. Obviously, you would argue, well, that's because, we've got a serious problem in the system, which I don't disagree with either. But how do we go about, how would you recommend going about this necessary change in terms of educating people, getting them out of the grip of not only what they're being told, but what they're experiencing, and and also through their upbringing, which has obviously been, you work hard, you get a job, you pay your bills, you raise a family, and you die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. As a materialist, like materialist in the philosophical sense, not like we look like I want more things, kind of materialist.
All that, yeah.
I think people's mind and like thoughts are influenced by their material conditions, and you can see that in today's world, like there is a rise in the right wing. I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah,
that is because the material conditions has changed. Like last time we have seen a rise in the right wing is before World War II, and there was a depression, and now we're in another depression. And we've seen the rise of the right wing.
Right.
The right wing rises as a response to the material conditions, like the economy, living standards decreasing.
Right.
And
right. Yeah.
they're pointed. I think people know that like they're in the shit. They know it.
Yeah.
Like intuitively, like how like if you ask someone on the street, like a homeless person on the street, like, do you think your life is good? Like, of course, like they'll say like, no, of course not.
Yeah. Or you just ask a random person at halls today,
anywhere,
and they'll just be like, oh, I don't have a job. Oh, my job is like really unstable. Yeah.
Yeah, and like a right wing person will tell you, oh, it's because the immigrants. It's because the blacks, the Asians, the whatevers, right? It's because those people are stealing your jobs and shit. Well, that's not really the case, is it? Like, it's because the capitalists. Right?
Yeah.
It's because the capitalists want more profit, and like logically, of course, they will want more profit. It's not blaming them for anything.
They're a product of the environment, essentially, right?
They wouldn't be capitalists if they don't want profit.
Yeah.
Like they want profit, so they cut wages, they cut jobs. they bring out like right wing leaders like Boris Johnson who like has austerity measures. They bring up Trump, like who cut taxes to the rich. Like they bring up all these right wing people, right wing politicians to help the capitalists earn more profit, and it's so easy to see that. Well, it's not like it's obvious, but like people sometimes don't see it, and like even in like a lot of right wing people in America, like they say, down with like big business.
That's true. Yeah, that's really true. You're right.
Like they're not like it's good that they say that.
Yeah,
like,
but they're doing it the wrong. They're not really understanding why they're mad at. Like they don't. Would you say that they don't really go as deep as say like a Marxist would in terms of why they criticize and the reasons for their criticism of such?
They think, well, like I'm not really sure like how right wing people think about like big businesses and whatnot.
Yeah.
But they might think, oh, it's because the people are bad. Well, no, not really. The people are not bad people. Like it's like George Soros like a bad person. Well, not I don't know, but probably not really a bad person. He just wants what's best for him, which is profit. And you know, the working class is not good with that.
Yeah, it's
because
like
more profit for you is less wages for us.
Absolutely,
it's obvious.
Yeah. So it's like it kind of reminds me of the saying, you know, you don't blame the player, blame the game, because you know George Soros is he's just a player in a game that he's done pretty good at. He's done pretty well in, you know, compared to the average person. Yeah. Right. So going back to that dichotomy of like, you know, right wing nationalism and communism, when you go to, you would probably agree that that clash was pretty similar with what was happening in China between Mao and Chiang Kai-shek. Is that right? Or was that a little bit down to circumstance? Because from what I remember, Mao, it was actually Chiang Kai-shek was actually doing quite well. It was just it was an unstable situation that he was in. It was a very complicated way where he came to power. While Mao was more, he had a bit of a following, right? But it wasn't as prominent as we eventually got to know it. What are your...
Yeah, well, it's definitely like a clash between the right and the left, like the typical. Yeah. When I say Chiang Kai-shek is doing well for himself, like, is the country doing well?
The country's
well, he's doing well for himself.
Yeah, he's doing well for himself. Yeah. Sorry, I should have been more clear. Yeah,
but like the country
state itself is
pretty in the shit, right?
Yeah, they've got they had warlords governing their own provinces, and it sounded like chaos, like Wild West kind of.
Yeah, it's so obviously Mao's rise was due to this condition. It's not because like Mao was so smart and he manipulated everyone. No, of course not.
Right.
Mao was given the opportunity to become a revolutionary leader only because the situation in China was so bad, so shit, that like people have no way out. They look for someone, and Mao just happens to be the one who has the right idea. And you know, if let's say if Mao was never born, like there will be another person who has like kind of similar ideas.
Yeah. I was gonna ask. Well, he was pretty good at recognizing how to win the people. I remember was it true about the Red Army? How his army, what they call the Red Army? The Red Army. Yeah. How they would. How there was this big history in China of having like an army that was very brutal. It didn't, you know, fight for the people. They kind of took advantage of the locals and, you know, pillaged and raped and all these atrocities and stuff. While Mao made it very strict on his army. I don't know if it was Mao himself who made this decision, but I remember hearing about how he made sure that the Red Army was disciplined, that it didn't treat the villagers badly if they were going through a certain town, and that way helped gain more followers, gain more support when he was fighting Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces. Is that am I misreading it?
Okay, so
I mean, this is, I'm sure there might be a bit of
well, I mean, Mao's military theory was based on winning the people over, right? Because let's face it, the Red Army is shit. Okay, the Red Army is really bad. Like they have no guns, no ammo, no nothing, right? They don't have planes, they don't have tanks, they don't have artillery. Right? How did they win is because everybody supported them. Like if you have no support in the rural area, how are you going to feed your army?
And rural areas like
it's
literally
like 90% of China.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, of course, the Red Army would treat the villages well, right? That's the whole point, is to win the people over that way.
Yeah.
Is to not only
and also goes in line with whole Marxist interpretation that he took, right? I mean, he was looking at Lenin's thing about, but the idea that, you know, it's the workers, it's the people, it's the general population that we need to stand by in order to take over. I mean, I guess that was how he sold it, right?
Yeah. I mean, Lenin will kind of probably see like Mao as kind of like a weird version of Marxism, because he didn't rely on the workers, which is like 1% of the population. He relied on the 90%, which is the peasants.
Yeah.
And like Marx and Lenin might have a bit of an if with that, but you know, Mao did what he had to do.
Yeah, he made it work. So what was the? Because eventually, what happened is they kicked Chiang Kai-shek out, right? And he went to Taiwan. Is that right?
Yeah, he went to Taiwan.
How many followers did he take with him? I remember it being quite a decent amount.
Yeah, it's quite a decent amount. I think a lot of the high ranking officers went with him. Obviously, there are some military personnel that went with him. I think it's his own personal troops, because like Chiang Kai-shek was also a warlord. Like his troops were like much better equipped than the rest of the Chinese Nationalist Army. So I think some of his troops went with him as well.
Okay.
But yeah, like I'm not exactly sure like how many went.
Yeah. But it was a decent amount. But was there? Do you know if there was ever a threat to Mao's like leadership after he took power in terms of external factors from Chiang Kai-shek?
Yeah. Like Chiang Kai-shek was also always planning to come back, of course, right? He'd be stupid if he didn't. So he was always planning to come back, and that's why China was always kind of under threat. First from America, from the U.S., like in the Korean War, like Americans supporting Chiang Kai-shek. Like America supported Chiang Kai-shek during the Civil War. So why wouldn't they support Chiang Kai-shek coming back to China and taking over again? Right. So there was this constant threat. And after the break with the Soviets in 1958-ish.
What was that about, actually? Sorry, yeah, that's actually, I forgot to ask. What was that? Sorry, I know we're diverting a little bit, but the split between the Soviets and the Chinese, was that just geopolitics influence, or was there a bit something deeper than that?
Well, so there's two answers that I can give you. One is simply like geopolitics. Like Mao wanted China to become the big leader in the socialist world. Like the socialist communist world. That's one reason that you can take. The other reason being it's an ideological split, because Mao thought Khrushchev as a revisionist. Like revisionism in terms of Marxist term is someone who bastardized basic principles of Marxism and like twisted it and bringing back capitalism. And there are reasons why Mao would see Khrushchev as a revisionist, because he's instead of saying the Communist Party of the USSR was a party of the proletariat, the working class, Khrushchev instead said the party is for everyone, which is not right. No, the party is not for everyone. The party is exclusively for the proletariat.
Right.
And they like Marxists don't hide their
fascinating.
Principle.
Yeah.
Like it's supposed to be the dictatorship of the proletariat. The working class is going to oppress the other classes, the capitalist classes, the landlords.
Right.
And Khrushchev kind of just go, well, maybe not, maybe no.
Yeah.
And that's why, that's the ideological answer. But I think the answer is in between. Like Mao obviously see Khrushchev as a revisionist, which is why he wanted China to become the leader of the communist world. Maybe that's my interpretation.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. What was his relationship with Stalin? Because I do remember there being quite... Well, I mean, as we know, Stalin was very paranoid and very kind of insecure as a leader. He kind of struggled to relax when he was at the top, obviously, because of the way he got there. So he must have seen Mao as kind of a intimidating figure. I mean, he had this newly united country behind him, and he, you know, kind of envied him a little bit and how they respected him and stuff. Well, that's just an assumption I'm making. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yes and no. Like Stalin, I think Stalin fucked up. Like he kind of like fucked up China's revolution a bit. Like he suggested the Chinese Communist Party just liquidate themselves and join the nationalists.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So and it failed horribly. Like the communists got massacred, and Mao was like, okay, Stalin's kind of dumb in that respect.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
So like, we're just gonna not listen to the Comintern, the Communist International anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's why he ran away with like his supporter into the mountains and started his own shit, right? But after that, like Stalin also proposed like splitting China in half, where like Mao rules one half and Chiang Kai-shek rules the other half, and Mao just kind of, because he was kind of like really careful, like, oh, what if the communists lose in the war, right? That would be bad. So instead of them losing completely, I might as well like have a bit, so there's at least a bit of communism left. And I guess Mao exceeded his expectation and just conquered and just took over China entirely. But after that, I mean, China's industrial basis was given by the Soviets, right? All the industrial, like the engineers, the scientists, the factories. There, I think it was called like the 156 project. I'm not sure the English translation is correct, but it's basically like 156 industries just been pretty much just given to China for like basically no interest. So
right. Wow, that's crazy. Like how all these things come together in such different ways as well. Like one of the things I've just got to open the
like what am I gonna say? Yeah, like Mao's comment on Stalin was he's 70% right and 30% wrong. And I think the 30% wrong is probably like his dumbass plan to like liquidate the Communist Party and join the nationalists.
Did that help Mao's attain like leadership? Because I know that he wasn't a leading figure in the movement before up to a certain point during the Civil War. Was that around the time where he kind of after started to rise the ranks, or was he already kind of reaching the peak?
Well, he wasn't the leading figure at the time. The leading figure was Chen Duxiu, and some other, like I thought Li Lisan. So there's like two other dudes that's leading the Communist Party, but their line failed. Like there was like a revolution in 1925, 1926, and 1927. And it failed because it was in the cities with like minimum amount of workers.
Right.
And a lot of the workers were like forced on strike. Like the communists would just go to factories like, you must go on strike. Like, well, no, fuck no.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on strike.
Yeah.
Like there's no like popular support. Because like there isn't a populace.
Right.
And that's why kind of their line just failed, and everybody said, well, these two dumb fucks didn't really do much, did they?
Yeah, they didn't have any impacts, yeah.
It's like, well, like this Mao guy seems to have some good ideas, and we're already fucked as we are, so we might as well follow him.
Yeah. Right. Because what was the culture? The culture of China that I remember. I think it was Napoleon that said about China being like let her rest because once she wakes, she'll be unstoppable.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. Obviously, we look at classical history, and China's got this incredibly rich and insane level of like technological advancement, insane level of like work in the arts and in military and wars, empire, you name it. China's probably done it like to the level that us Westerners have no bloody idea about. When there was the Opium Wars and how China essentially got dismantled as more or less a state, and that's when the warlords came in, the destabilization happened with each of the provinces. Would you say that it was ingrained in the memory of every Chinese person of what it meant to be Chinese, or was it only until Mao came along that they realized actually we can do better?
I think the Chinese identity, like Chinese as a national identity, arise from the hundred years of struggles that started from the Opium War. Like, it's not like the Han people struggling and the Manchu people are like all good, all well and good. No,
Yeah,
everybody was struggling at the time. They were
Right.
struggling against Western imperialism. They were struggling against their own corrupt government, and it didn't really change after the nationalist, like the Republic of China was established. There was still oppression. Like different ethnicities were oppressed, and you know, it's not like the national like I would say like Chiang Kai-shek as a fascist, but like he didn't really just go, okay, we're gonna uphold the Han people and oppress the others. Like no, the warlords, the landlords, the capitalists, the compradors oppressed everyone equally. Well, equally as in like
right, yeah,
and Japanese didn't really bother whether you're Manchu or you're Han or you're Mongolian. It'll just kill you anyways.
yeah, because they just saw
And
you
that's
as,
why there is a I think a crystallization of Chinese as an identity. Like it doesn't matter if we like believe in Muslims or we're Han people or we're Catholics or whatever. Like we are Chinese and we're in it together against the Japanese imperialists, the Western imperialists, and the corrupt government led by Chiang Kai-shek.
right. Yeah, because I mean that's a big thing. I mean, you look at the way that BBC will have an article or something on China, and they'll go and interview people on the street, and everyone will be saying, with great pride, what it means to be Chinese under, Mao's China, in Mao's China, specifically now Xi Jinping's China, and there seems to be like a development now in modern China today where we're seeing China now start to make pretty significant moves in taking over in areas where US influence is limited. Like Africa, for instance, is a huge example of that. Do you think that's sustainable for China? Because I think people possibly may be looking at China's growth in through the wrong lens. Because I reckon China's more focused on economic expansion than, the more, well, economic expansion is something the US did as well, but they've been very calculated in avoiding getting involved in unnecessary conflicts that don't concern them for the sake of getting an alliance. Do you think that this is a sustainable approach for the Chinese state?
Well, it's as sustainable as any capitalist methods are, which is not very sustainable.
Right.
And, the reason why I think, in my opinion, that China is not getting into many conflicts is because they don't need to. And America do need to get into conflicts to secure their imperial interest. But China doesn't need to do that. They can use economic means, like getting countries into debt. Like Sri Lanka was in debt, and like one of the ports were given to China, wasn't it? So they don't need to like, oh, let's go and invade a country to become imperial power. They can just use soft power to imperialize other countries. And they're like the Chinese government now is pretty oppressive to its own citizens.
Right.
Which is another reason why I don't think it's very sustainable. Like the only legitimacy given to the Chinese to the current Chinese regime is economic growth. Like there is huge there is just huge economic growth, which is like good of course. That's one of the reasons. The other one being that they didn't really lose their Maoist legacy. Like they still kind of kept Mao as like this like
symbol.
Symbol like of unity or something. Whereas when you look at Russia kind of just lost that. And it's like, okay, let's cast away everything related to communism.
Yeah.
Which is why like Russia just kind of.
Although ironically now, I mean, have you heard about the Russian government has issued like textbooks now where they've kind of done a lot of revision of what happened during communist China, referring to Stalin and stuff. Like, they've started to kind of change their perspective on Stalin, even though when Stalin died, Khrushchev made it clear that he wasn't a good guy. But now it seems like they're kind of changing that image as time goes on.
Yeah, I don't think they're doing it like for like, oh, we want to bring back communism.
Yeah,
like Stalin,
yeah.
communism. No.
Yeah.
Like, I would say Stalin is like a socialist, is a Marxist, is a communist, not just like a tyrant or whatever. They're bringing it back because, like, Stalin, the national leader, the great hero
during
that
the
saved
war.
that saved the Russian nation. It was not because Stalin, the great socialist, who saved socialism in front of Nazi Germany. No, that's not. Like, same with Mao. Mao was like the great man who saved China, the Chinese nation. It was not Mao, the great socialist who built socialism in China for 40 years.
Yeah. And it's also, I guess, the same we could talk about with Winston Churchill or some other figure that's very controversial but also revered in his own country or her own country. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, speaking about the unsustainability of China's like actions towards its own citizens, I mean, the Uyghur situation with its Muslim population, what is the objective there? Like, why now? Why is it? I mean, obviously, I'm sure it's been a thing at the past where the Chinese want to have been encroaching in those areas where minorities live and stuff. But why the scale of it now is so big?
Well, I think this is probably tangentially related to the rise of right-wing nationalism in the world and in China as well. Like, people think like Xi Jinping is like the second Mao or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, no, he is very nationalistic. He is not a Marxist like Mao. And I've said that many times.
He suffered under Mao, right? When he was younger, he was actually a victim of.
Not really. I mean, he went to the rural areas. He went to the villages. That's where he got his prestige as like a communist.
Yeah, right.
Member of the Communist Party. So that's why he rise to the top. Not he wasn't like oppressed by Mao sending him to the villages.
Because his dad had quite a pretty good position in the party, right? But then he got kind of excommunicated for a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is why they got sent from the city to the country, and then he spent a few years as a shepherd or something like that. I heard.
Yeah, kind of something like that.
So I mean, obviously it was a big change, but you're saying it wasn't anything significant in terms of he suffered. It was just more. Yeah, he went to the country for a few years, and then eventually his dad got his job back. He got back into the party, and then was able to. I wouldn't
even say he suffered. Maybe he might have.
Yeah.
He might have benefited from this experience as like, oh, I have worked in the villages, like I am the man of the people, right? So, I think that's kind of like his image. Like, he wants to build himself as like Mao 2.0. But when you look under his facade of like Maoism, like, he's also kind of revising the history of the Cultural Revolution. But he's not doing it because like he can bring back communism or socialism back to China. Even if he wanted to, like, he's just one person. He can't just go, let's do that and this and that, and there we go, socialism. No.
Like, it'll require a huge
like
effort.
If he does that, like if like Xi Jinping actually does that, like tomorrow he'll be like gone, and like there'll be another leader.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, what's the economic situation in the Uyghur region, for instance? Are they generally quite working class or?
Yeah, I think they're pretty much all working. Sorry, I dodged that question a bit.
No. Sorry. I was just actually just thinking, because I mean, you always see the Han or the Manchu people who have, like, you know, who seem to be predominantly working middle class now. They've kind of progressed. I mean, obviously there's the other side that the media never really shows, but the growth of the middle class in China has been quite dramatic, hasn't it? I never thought about asking about the
Yeah,
Uyghurs
I think
actually.
Uyghurs are mostly working class. I don't think there's any large business that are owned by Uyghurs.
Mm.
So yeah, in terms of like why are they doing it now? Well, the official answer is that some of the Uyghurs are terrorists and they
Yeah.
came back to China. But obviously, even if they are terrorists, you shouldn't be like locking them up into like camps. That's not. Also, like we need to distinguish like the propaganda that it's been like
Like
diffused.
re-education camps, right?
Yeah,
Like this Orwellian kind of
yeah. But
idea.
it's
It's
literally
crazy.
the truth. It's the truth that the Chinese government want to show you, at
Yeah.
least, that they are being re-educated, literally, like
Yeah. They've been
learning
told.
in
Yeah.
classrooms
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
camps.
Yeah.
And like, sure, they're forced into there, but
Yeah.
like they're not being massacred or anything.
Right. I mean, well, some would say that their culture is being massacred because they're being told, right. Well, this is what you can. This is what being a Chinese. This is what being Chinese is about. This is what you need to understand. Would you not agree that there's kind of a conflict there with forcefully changing someone's approach to their lifestyle?
Yeah,
in
I
that
think there
sense?
is a huge problem in that. Like, but I think again the problem seems to be overblown. Like the examples cited are usually they're blowing up mosques, which is not really happening. Like they didn't. Like I think they destroyed a couple of mosques, but they kind of just rebuilt it again. Like obviously, like organized religion is suppressed in China because you have to be like state sanctioned organized religion, like state sanctioned
Right.
churches and mosques. So it's not as oppressed. It's as oppressed as like the Christians, basically. If you think they're oppressed,
Oh, so the Christians aren't oppressed is what you're getting to.
like if you
And
consider Christians, like if you consider the Muslim population oppressed, then you have to consider the Christians are oppressed as well, which I don't think they are because my grandmother, both from my parents and from my parents' sides, are Christians and they don't seem to have a huge problem with
because
that.
actually, hang on. What's the religious? How does religion function in China? What are the rules and stuff?
They are state sanctioned, like
They can you can operate but they have to be separate from the state. They can't.
yeah.
Do you guys have any Christian schools, for instance, or?
I think there. I'm not sure. I don't think there are any Christian school. If there is, it will be private, and like parents would kind of think it weird, like
Right.
Christian
Yeah.
schools. Like
Yeah.
we don't have that in China. Like culturally, we don't have that in China.
Right.
And besides, like if you want like go into a private school, we go to like an actual like international school,
Yeah.
which is like better, or we go to public school, which is cheap. Like why would you go to a Christian school that seems like just odd?
Yeah, definitely.
So, like in terms of competition, I don't think there would be any.
Right. Yeah. what so just to clarify, so do you think that the media is kind of like taking the Uyghur situation a bit out of proportion?
Yeah, I think they're taking it out of proportion. Like I do agree that certain minorities are being oppressed in China, like the Tibetans a little bit, the Uyghurs. Like when you go to Xinjiang, where the Uyghurs live, like
That's east, west, right?
yeah,
Of China? West China,
northwestern province. They're pretty like it's pretty militarized. They're like police, like armed police on the street. You don't see that a lot in China. So like, are they oppressed? Yes, they are oppressed. Like, but then you say like, are they in like camps and they're being massacred? No, they're not really being massacred. Are their culture being withered away? Yes, probably because they're being taught Mandarin instead of their own language. Like, I don't think that it's good, but then again, I don't think it's as bad as what the West is saying. Like they're being sent to camps to like being worked to death or whatever.
Right.
So
yeah.
like they're being forcefully re-educated,
Mm.
like taught new skills,
Mm.
which is like they're being forced, which is not good, but they're being taught new skills is a good
Right.
thing, right?
Right. Interesting. So then, when we talk about Hong Kong, what would you say that it's the same kind of situation there? The Western media is kind of taking it a bit out of proportion, or well, firstly, let's start off with the basics. The Hong Kong as part of China, is that something you would see as, yeah, I mean, they're Chinese, or what's your opinion on that? Because they claim they have their own kind of national feeling and stuff.
Mm, do they have their own like like is like being a Hong Konger like a national identity? I'm not sure. I think their culture is similar and their language is similar enough to be considered like part of the Chinese nation.
Mhm.
So in that sense, no. But like their government, uh, their style of governance and their economy is obviously run differently. So in that sense, like in a political sense, like they're pretty independent. Like they're officially China, but they're pretty independent in terms of economy and politics.
So how does their economy? How is that independent of the Chinese economy? How does that function? Like, do you know? Do you understand like the more or less basics of like how does that even work? How can you be officially part of China but actually have your own economy like without the mainland being involved? Like, is that if that's what you're saying, right?
They're being involved in terms of like being a trade partner.
Right. Yeah.
Like the
yeah.
mainland is trading with Hong Kong. Like they have their own currency.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But their economy is not like being centrally planned by Beijing.
right. Okay, it's being planned by Hong Kong and
Yeah.
okay.
Well, it's not being planned. It's just it's a
being
free
up-
market
yeah.
economy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole situation with Hong Kong now. Where do you stand? Like, do you think it's been overreaction from both sides, or what are your thoughts on that?
So, well, as a Marxist, as a leftist, like I don't support the police. I don't support the authoritarian Chinese state. But do I then go and support the protesters? I don't think I can support them. Like, I'm not exactly sure what they want. Like, they seem to want all sorts of different things. Like, some of them want independence, which is okay, fine, fair enough. Some of them want the 5 demands, like release and like universal suffrage, which is okay, fine, fair enough. So like this two objectives to me is incompatible because if you're asking the government to give you something,
Yeah.
you cannot then simultaneously trying to overthrow the government.
Right.
Which is like you need to pick one.
Yeah.
And like, okay, if they pick the independence route, then they're going to war with the PLA. And are they capable of going to war with the PLA? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. Do they have enough popular support? Like, is like the entire city of Hong Kong, like everybody hates the communists and they just want to kick them out? No, not really.
Because there's quite a significant amount of people in Hong Kong who actually support the mainland that isn't getting a lot of coverage.
Because the protesters are not doing like okay, say if like one of the protester is like Mao, right? Then maybe, but no, that they're not doing like they're not earning the trust of the masses. Like burning down metro stations, like what's the point of that? Like beating up like mainland people, okay, what's the point of that?
Right.
Like destroying mainland shops. Okay, like
Right.
Hong Kong people also work in those shops, you know.
Yeah.
So like whatever you're doing, like this is like not the way to go.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've seen footage of like friends, people from my university who have been on the tube and stuff, the metro in Hong Kong, and all of a sudden these protesters with masks, they come on with like bamboo sticks and they start smacking everyone on the thing. On the
Really?
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
Okay.
And like it's like a whole bunch of them. They all swarm into the into the tube, and then from the footage you just hear like pa 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 like a machine gun, but it's not. It's the swinging of the bamboo sticks, and then all of a sudden it's over and they run off, and then you just see all the people, all the protesters, just lying down and being like, "What the hell just happened?" You know, obviously in pain. Like that was around the time when the triads were kind of alleged to be involved in the police, because these were plainclothed assailants, to say. Do you think that there is a connection there? That it is valid to assume that there is a kind of a connection with the triads, or
I mean,
do you?
Like the mafia.
Yeah,
Chinese
yeah.
Mafia. Yeah, I wouldn't say like the police are like infiltrated by mafias,
Right.
but I wouldn't be surprised if like there are like more violent members of the police that are just like being given orders to just beat people up. I wouldn't be surprised if that's like if that's the case. And I wouldn't even be surprised if like certain police officers were dressed in plain clothes in like the protesters, like just trying to start trouble.
Right. Yeah. That's been one of the many accusations, actually. What's the opinion of mainland China? Like people that you know from mainland China, what do they think of Hong Kong? Like what's the view? Because I mean, from the outside world, we just it's Hong. You know, from as long as I know, it's been part of China, even though it was under control of the British Empire for a long time. Because the people, you know, they look Chinese, right? It's a very basic, stereotypical kind of perspective. But you know, like what? Because obviously there is kind of a tension, right?
Yeah. What do mainlanders think of the situation? Well, they overwhelmingly support the police. Like, beat those like rioters up. Yeah, dude.
Really?
Like, yeah.
Wow.
So okay, like that's their opinion. Like, okay. Weird.
It's so intense.
Yeah, like so. They think that it's like all like just like a Western like conspiracy, like like the CIA, the NED is funding this, like it's all American plot, it's all British plot. That's
Really?
That's why they're like doing with the American flags and all that.
Oh yeah,
like,
right.
It's partly true, of course. Like they like some of them are funded by the NED. Like let's face it.
Are they?
There are like evidence for that. Like, but it's like. It's pointless to say, oh, look, that one person like got money from this American guy, therefore he's funded by the FBI or the CIA or whatever. Like, so, like that doesn't. That's not the point. Like, the CIA can't just like give all these like 2 million people like, here's $100 for you, go on protest.
And no one's gonna hear about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's not like it's not like just a conspiracy and all these people are used or whatnot. Like they obviously have their own grievances. It's just, I think they're not expressing it in the most correct way, I guess.
So if let's say a Hong Kong uni student goes to mainland China to study, how would his experience or her experience be like with mainlanders?
Well, I have a friend from Hong Kong, and his experience with mainlanders here are not very pleasant.
Right.
Because they kind of just look down upon him because he doesn't know how to speak Mandarin. Well, he does actually know how to speak Mandarin.
Right.
He just doesn't speak it very well. Well, actually, he does speak it very well. He just has a really heavy accent. And like they kind of just like
distance
like,
themselves.
Distance themselves from him.
Do you think it's just because his identity happens to be Hong Kong, as well as the fact that he has a heavy accent when he speaks?
I don't think it's because his identity as Hong Kong. Like, I think a lot of like it's just here in Britain. So
but yeah. So you can't really generalize.
A lot of them
that,
are very nationalistic. Like as a Chinese person, you need to know how to speak Mandarin because it's the official language designated by the government.
Right.
And a lot of people like worship the government here, which is really weird. A lot of Chinese people worship the government, or like, oh, the law. Like there's one argument or one discussion on like a group with a bunch of Chinese people about the like immigration. And I was like, oh, illegal immigrants should face punishment because they broke the law. Well, yes, they did break the law, but don't you think that the law needs to be revised, perhaps?
Yeah.
like the law is not like everything that's correct.
Right.
The law is just
Yeah.
whatever the ruling class think will benefit them.
Yeah.
Right?
That's really interesting, actually. Yeah. Oh my God. Well, yeah, then I can imagine how... Well, I mean, that's always been kind of the perception that we've had of China, you know, like they're very proud and very structured in how everything is governed and how everything is ordered. And, you know, there's a etiquette that you kind of have to uphold to. Obviously, you go to the US, it's like a policeman will come over and be like, hey, can I check your register? And they'll be like, I don't have to show you anything without a warrant, blah, blah, blah. And it's a totally different... Shot. Yeah, you know, and then there's a big outcry about... you know, the role of the police and everything, when really all the guy had to do was just be like, hey, sure, you know, and then I'll be on my way kind of thing. But now you get this whole thing about, you know, some white guy filming a cop who's like pointing a gun at him when he could just not and try and diffuse it. I'm not saying that cops in the US are corrupt, because there's definitely a serious problem there. But it's just that the culture there is so different to China. I'm sure in China, if a cop tells you to do something, it's like, oh, absolutely, you know, no questions asked. Obviously, not with someone like you.
No, actually,
oh, really? Really, it's not.
Yeah,
sorry. Okay,
because the Chinese police is pretty benign.
Oh, okay.
Like they kind of just like the good guys. Like they just first because they're not armed, right? Last time, like there's a funny story. Last time I was at home in Shenzhen. And when I woke up, I think like the lights in my room were on. Like I don't know why. Like I was a bit scared because maybe someone like got into my room or something and turned on the lights. So I called the police, and the police just came like, "Don't worry about it. Like we'll check around." Like and then they defer to the security guards, and they just come in and check around. Like it's not like because the police in China is not armed like with guns. So a lot of them just like kind of doesn't really care. Like, okay, sure. Like we respect police officers, but we respect them not because like they're armed and we like really afraid of them.
Right.
It's just because like we think they're like servants of the people or something.
That's totally changed my
Yeah, it's not like a police state in
China.
Yeah.
Because you know that's exactly what we get sold. This idea that, you know, that with this new social currency.
Okay, but it is a police state.
It is,
but like it's not overt. Like all the police are like jackbooted thugs.
No. Right. That's incredible. Wow, China's a crazy, interesting country to talk about. But yeah, I think for now we've covered quite a lot. I reckon we could definitely continue this conversation another time. Anything else you want to continue talking about before we finish?
I don't really think there is anything. I think I made a few mistakes, but I can't remember what they are, so I can't really like correct them now.
No, I'm sure it's.
But yeah, so like, I guess the final closing thought is like, yes, like, I guess believe the Western media like 50% when it's about China. Like when they say like China is doing something, they're probably doing it, but not as bad.
Right. Actually, that's a good question to end off. What would you recommend people like look at? Is there kind of a news source on China by the Chinese government? By the Chinese government, or by the Chinese government or whatever in English that's available for people to read about?
Okay, so I think if you go on YouTube, there's a channel called CGTN.
CGTN.
And it's an English like YouTube video, but it's funded by the Chinese government. So there's that. I'm sure if you just search like CCTV English and we're like Chinese Central Television Network English, and there'll probably be like English channels, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I don't read like news in English.
Yeah, in English. Yeah,
obviously.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very difficult. Yeah, right. Yeah, no. Well, yeah, I'll definitely look into that a bit more, because obviously it's one thing to see it from the perspective of the outside, but you know, it's always interesting to find a way to look at it from the perspective of the inside as well. Well, Tim, thank you so much, man. It's been really awesome, man. Really awesome.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, man. No, it's been really good. We'll definitely continue this another time.